Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We have people trickling in here, so we're going to give it just a couple minutes, make sure everyone's in here. In the meantime, if you want to, put your name, your company, and where you're calling from and what you're most excited about today in the chat, that would be really fantastic. Hi, for all the newcomers getting in here, we're going to be starting in about 1 minute. If you want to throw your name in the chat and where you're watching from and what company you represent, that would be fantastic. I'm Sophie and I'm the community manager at FoundED. I see a lot of FoundED people in here. That's great.
I would love to hear some intros from people who are in here. Oftentimes it helps me understand how I can help more, better. So yeah, jump in the chat and just let's get some intros going.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Sigal. All right, so we'll let people keep coming in. And in the meantime, I'm going to kick it off. So welcome. As I said, I am Sophie. I'm the community manager at Project FoundED. I see a number of wonderful members in our community watching today. Hi, guys. For everyone else who's new, just to let you know, so we're a community of EdTech founders, and we believe technology's role is to deliver equitable learning outcomes for all learners. Our community is an affinity group bringing founders together, and we're supporting founders in the delivery of that goal through amazing events, working with wonderful hosts like Nelly, who is actually a founder in our community, yay! And delivering the insights, strategies, and support you need to grow your business. If you haven't checked us out already, go to projectfounded.org, where you can sign up, be a part of the Slack group, get all the notifications about these and other wonderful events coming up. Today's event, super exciting. It's all about product strategy, and how you can be thinking about this as an EdTech founder with some really amazing principles that you can keep in mind to deliver and develop your product leanly as necessary in those first few years of building it. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Nelly to introduce herself and fill you in about today's workshop.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie. Hi, everybody. I'm going to quickly share my screen. 1 second. Here we go. I'll go to full screen mode. All right. Today, it's going to be a really exciting topic. I work a lot with EdTech entrepreneurs who happen to, a lot of them predominantly be non-technical, right? Most of the EdTech entrepreneurs have an idea. They are not necessarily a developer or a coder. And one of the biggest reasons why they come to me and they take my program and all this other, like in my system, is because they lose thousands of dollars to technology mistakes. And so today I'm going to show you how you can cut your product development costs by up to 50% using a process that I've used and refined with my own teams. And as we go through the presentation, I'm going to run through the entire process. And if you guys have questions, drop them into the chat. I will also be asking you to participate and commit to different things. So be ready for that as well. So let's see. Today I'm going to, let's see, there we go. Today I'm going to show you how you can make the shift from struggling to launching your products on time and on budget to successfully managing your teams and projects and actually save up to 50% on your product development costs. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a CTO at a startup tech advisor and the creator of TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs Academy, which is a platform, an online training that I've developed in 2012. And it's all about teaching the most effective and efficient ways to manage your tech teams and projects, even if you're not technical or know how to code. And what's really most important for you to know is that I have managed tech teams and projects for over 18 years, and I've refined and optimized my process over time. And I taught my TechSpeak 10-step process to over 1,200 students so far, and worked with hundreds of different startups, helping them with their tech strategies and help them fix and optimize their processes. So I've got a question for you. Can you imagine what it would feel like if your developers could deliver your products on time and on budget? Think of how much time and money you can save if you had the tools and the skills to get your developers to deliver your project without delays. Type yes in the comments if you no longer want to be at the mercy of developers, no longer not having the skills and the confidence to predictably launch your product on time and on budget over and over and over it again. Can I get a yes to that? I hope all of you are saying yes, because that is exactly why we're here, and exactly why I started teaching my process to tech entrepreneurs, so that they can get their power back and be able to lead a team effectively and efficiently, whether or not you're technical. All right, so here's where we're going today. First, we're going to learn, when I switch here, hold on, okay. First, we're going to learn what is a process and why a good process is not enough. Then we're going to learn the difference between the lean versus the classic way of building products, 2 money-saving things that you should do before you build anything, how to define your MVPs properly to reduce the time and cost of development, how to see the red flags sooner so you can minimize mistakes. Then I'm going to share how to work with me for those of you who are interested, and then we'll get into the live Q&A. So as we go through the presentation, as I mentioned, you're probably going to have questions come up. Most likely I'll address them in the presentation, but if I don't, we're going to take all the questions at the end, and I'll stay here a little bit extra if you guys need the extra time to be able to answer questions. All right, let's get moving. So what is a process? A process is a series of steps which, when followed diligently, give you the same result no matter who performs them. It is a repeatable way to produce consistent results over and over and over again. And a good product development process is important because it creates transparency throughout all of your projects, so you can detect earlier when things are headed in the wrong direction. But a good product development process is not enough, because there's a difference between releasing code and releasing code effectively and efficiently. Lots and lots of developers are releasing code every single day. If you currently have a team of developers, they release code every single day, right? All the time. They're launching new features, improving existing features. But if they're not using the latest methodologies in their processes, then I guarantee that you're wasting valuable time and money due to inefficiencies and miscommunications. And I want to demonstrate how important an efficient process is with this story. So this is Eric. He had a software startup for 3 years before he learned the TechSpeak process. He had a tech team, he had a CTO, and this is what he said after 3 years of running his software startup. He said, after 3 years in business, TechSpeak would have saved us close to $500,000 in delays, development costs, and sleepless nights. That's $500,000 in a span of 3 years due to delays, development costs, and sleepless nights. And that is the benefit of having an optimized process based on lean and agile methodologies. Again, there's a difference between releasing code and releasing code effectively and efficiently. And please, 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 please do not rely on developers to come up with a process. Most developers are not managers or might not be familiar with the latest methodologies that you should be using. They might have picked up a thing or two from whatever place they worked at before your company, but it might not be the most effective and efficient. Remember Eric, the story that I just shared? He had a tech team and a CTO, and they were not using an optimized process based on lean and agile methodologies, which of course meant that they lost almost $500,000 over a span of 3 years. So this is something that I that as a fractional CTO, I face and see all the time. I work with developers as well as non-technical entrepreneurs, and a lot of developers are just simply not familiar with a lot of these concepts. So I'm hoping, like you are the CEO, your job is to take some of these ideas that you're going to learn today from the process that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I want you to set that expectation of implementing these things the lean way, the more agile way, so that you can save a lot of time and money as you are building your startup. All right, so now that you know how important an efficient process is, let's learn the TechSpeak 10-step process and see how it can save you both time and money by allowing you to see the red flags sooner, catch mistakes earlier, and minimize the effects of the mistakes. Because it's unrealistic for any of us to never make mistakes, right? Your job as a founder actually is about minimizing mistakes, because no matter how good your processes are, it's unrealistic to expect that you'll never make mistakes. All of us do, right? Even I do. The key is to catch mistakes sooner, because the sooner you can catch the mistakes, the sooner you can address them, which of course minimizes the effects of the mistakes. And the two core pillars of my product development process are learn early, learn often, and learn cheap, and executing ideas the lean way. So for startups, especially early stage ones, especially startups in the EdTech space, and I'll address that in just a minute, it's so important to learn quickly, right? Learning quickly is really, really important, because the faster you learn something, the faster you will learn if you're headed in the right direction. You don't want to spend a ton of time and money going in the wrong direction. And what's the difference between the classic versus the lean way of building products? Let's first consider the classic way, because that's what most of us are familiar with. So you come up with the idea, you write your business plan, you get funding, whether you're finding it yourself or with friends and family money or angel money or VC, somebody actually has to pay for building the product. And then you spend 6 months to a year in silo building your secret product. And then you launch. So you've just committed 6 months to a year or even more of time, money, and resources, and then you get feedback. It may be a success. You may be one of those lucky people, right? But what if you discover that no one buys? What if it's a problem not worth solving? Did you build the wrong solution? Did you target the wrong market? This approach is like shooting arrows at a target with blinders on. It is a big bet, and it's very, very high risk. It's slow to market. It has zero customer validation, and it is very, very expensive. On the other hand, lean uses scientific methodology of hypothesis, test, learn, revise to discover what works with a lot less waste. In the lean process, every single brilliant idea that you have is actually a hypothesis. It's an experiment, right? It's an assumption that has to be proven right or wrong by talking to customers and getting insightful feedback, which allows you to learn whether your hypothesis is valid or if it needs to be revised. And then you create a new hypothesis that needs to be tested again. Everything drops into a lean development cycle of hypothesis, test, learn, revise, hypothesis, test, learn, revise. And the goal of your team is to minimize the total time through the loop by, you guessed it, learning as quickly as possible. And the faster you learn something, the faster you'll know if you're headed in the right direction. So basically, in the lean way of building products, your startup is a series of well-designed experiments that you are constantly testing so you can adjust your path to success. And here's the key. The smaller your experiments are, the faster you can test and learn whether something is working or not. So instead of taking this long approach to figure out whether something is working or not, we're taking lots and lots of small steps to get to success faster. Type yes into the chat if you see why these two pillars are necessary to getting to success faster without wasting a lot of time and effort going in the wrong direction. I want to make sure that you guys are all here and understand that these two pillars are what make up the process, and why the rest of the things I'm going to be teaching you is going to make sense now, right? If you don't buy into this, the rest of it is not going to work, right? So thank you guys for participating in the chat. I see lots of yeses. Absolutely. Great. So let's keep moving. Let's dive deeper into the TechSpeak 10-step process, and we'll talk about the 4 key things in the process that allow me to manage teams and projects successfully without wasting thousands of dollars. So the first key is to not build anything until you refine the idea and the solution. These are the first 2 steps in the process, because no matter how good your team is, whether they're in-house or outsourced or any combination of that, you will always waste time and money if you jump straight into coding without refining your ideas and the solutions, because you'll end up building a lot of unnecessary features and functionalities that your customers won't end up using, which of course results in a lot of wasted development, which directly translates into wasted time and money. Validation will help you refine your good ideas to make sure that they are painkillers. It's not enough to have good ideas for your products and features. Your ideas must solve a painkiller problem and not be a vitamin. Because if people just want what you're building but don't actually need it, you will have a much harder time getting your customers to use and pay for your products. The number one reason why a lot of products and new features for existing products fail to be adopted is not because they couldn't be built, but because no one wanted them in the first place. And I see this especially in EdTech, because you are selling to institutions, to people who have very specific processes and ways of doing things. And if you don't do this step for everything that you are thinking about, you're going to always overbuild. You're always going to have your guesswork, right? Is if it's not good, if you're thinking and guessing incorrectly, if you're not taking into account the current processes that your customers have when you're building your solutions, you're going to constantly be redoing things and possibly run out of money before you finish your product. Right? In comparison, it's actually easy to build something. It's finding the painkiller ideas that people are willing to pay for with their money and or time, and ideally both, is what is really, really hard to do, right? That's what's called building a business around your idea. So once you know what the painkiller ideas are, the rest of it is going to be so much easier. So you would refine your idea through a process called customer development. Customer development validation will help you address and understand your riskiest assumptions and adjust them if necessary. That's right. All of your ideas are assumptions, right? Until they're proven right or wrong. It'll help you understand specifically how other solutions on the market fail to solve the problem you're trying to solve, and identify the exact target market who would be willing to use and pay for your products. Even if you already have a product out in the market with paying customers, maybe there are certain features and functionalities that you should be targeting to a segment of your customers. And you really, really need to understand the exact target market before you build a solution, because the needs for different types of customers for the same exact solution would be very different, right? And that's why it's so important to do this step. Without these details and insights, you will always waste a ton of money recoding later, because you would eventually learn these insights, but only after the functionality is built. Okay, and a very, very important note that customer development validation is not about putting together a few surveys or doing focus groups. To get these types of valuable insights, you have to follow a very detailed hypothesis testing process by conducting one-on-one interviews with potential customers. Surveys have a great place in the later stages of your product development process, but you shouldn't be using surveys here. Because you're going to be leading your users to your solutions. And I am so against that. I want you to completely forget about your solution in this stage, right? The very first stage. My customer development process consists of 10 steps, and I have over 20 worksheets that I use and follow. So make sure that you don't take this step lightly. And I know so many founders who read all of the books on customer validation, they know all of the terminology, but they either implement it incorrectly or frankly, they don't do it at all because the books don't teach you the step-by-step for how to actually do it right. The books don't give you the process that your team can follow in a step-by-step manner, right? We're talking about process here. So you must focus on testing the right hypotheses and also designing the interviews in a way that does not lead the user to your solution. As I mentioned, I recommend that you forget about your solution in this validation step. And here's why. So I have a student who's going through my program. She was referred to me by a startup advisor who knows me, and she's actually in the EdTech space as well. And she told me, Nelly, she came into the program with a prototype. So she said to me, Nelly, I don't need to do validation. I'm a veteran in this industry. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know my market in and out. And I know that this is the solution that they need. But of course, I pushed her to do customer discovery. I said, forget about your solution and do some customer discovery interviews for a week or two. And if you discover something, great, because you can take those insights and directly bake them into your solution. And if you don't learn anything new, also great, because that will give you a lot more confidence that you're headed in the right direction. And of course, reluctantly, she did. And she discovered one insight in her second interview that she continued to verify over the next 2 weeks that completely changed the solution. She was still solving the same exact problem for the same exact market, but she discovered that she needed to do it in a completely different way. Her original solution was a part of the bigger solution that she realized that she needed to offer. And that, of course, saved her so much time and money, possibly years of trying to sell something that people didn't completely resonate with, right? And so that's how important this step is. So learn how to do it properly or work with someone who knows the process. Don't just assume that you know how to do this. And let's actually calculate how much not validating your ideas is costing you. We'll make some conservative assumptions. Let's assume that you spend an extra 3 months of developers' time because you've built too much functionality. Let's also assume that you're paying your developer $50 per hour, which in the US, it's a very conservative assumption. If you're outside of the US, adjust this number and redo the calculation for your region, okay? So based on these very conservative assumptions, for one developer, the total amount wasted is $24,000 for each new feature. In fact, the cost of not validating is even higher than this estimated $24,000 because skipping this step has cascading effects. First in the development stage and then in the sales and marketing stage. You will spend extra time and money at every single stage, possibly for features and functionalities that no one will ever use. And for those of you who are not currently doing validation at every single product idea that you have in your current process, I want you to type 24K into the chat to let your brain know that this is something you should focus on. I'm very action oriented. I don't like people going to events and not knowing exactly what to do at the end of it. I want you to type 24K to let your brain know that this is something I need to start to implement. This would literally be the most important change you can make or add into your product development process to stop wasting and overbuilding technology. We have Will typing lots of dollar signs around 24K. Awesome. Again, if you're watching a replay, do the same thing. Make sure you take action on a lot of the things that you are learning. All right, excellent. Let's keep moving. So once you validate your idea, you'll now need to refine the solution by first building an interactive, clickable prototype of the solution without writing any code. And then you'll refine the solution by getting feedback from potential customers. And these prototypes are so realistic, your potential customers won't even know that it's not real. So I'd like to share a prototype of a recording of me using one of these demos, right? Clickable prototypes on my phone. So you can see how realistic they are.
This is a recording of me using the prototype on my phone. As you can see, I can click on buttons and different elements, and it feels like I'm using a real app. We're simulating these interactions using prototyping tools. These tools allow us to easily define what elements will be clickable and what the user will see when they click on a hotspot. And all of this is done without writing any code. Looks pretty realistic, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? So let's talk about why you should never ever skip this step. So prototyping allows you to test multiple solutions before writing code, because just guessing what solution will resonate with your customers will always result in rewriting of code. By the way, writing code is a way of prototyping, but it's one of the most expensive ways of doing that. Right here, I have an example. Of one of my startups here. The very first two prototypes that they created completely didn't resonate with their users. So they went back to the drawing board after collecting feedback and got it right on the third try. And if they had jumped into coding after doing their very first prototype, the guesswork, right? They got it wrong. They would have had to rewrite so much code. And remember, it is a lot cheaper to rapidly change prototypes than it is to rewrite code. So stay on the cheaper end of writing code or testing your solutions than actually using the custom coding. And in between, we have no code solutions. And some people say, well, I'm using no code, so I don't need to do this step. Guess what? Using no code is also expensive, because on the back end, you're generating code. So it's a lot faster and cheaper to do things in the clickable prototype stage. And I know some of the questions that always get asked is like, what are some suggestions for these tools? There's Adobe XD, there's Figma, there's Sketch, there is InVision and Marvel app. There's lots and lots of tools. They're all almost identical, right? One of the biggest issues that you'll find when using these tools is that a lot of designers are now jumping into these tools to start their design work. So they're abandoning Photoshop and going into these tools to do design. What that means for you is that these tools have thousands of bells and whistles and a lot of features and functionalities. So it becomes a little bit of inaccessible. And so in my trainings, I actually have, when I teach people how to do this, I literally say, these are the 10 things you need to know. This is how to start building prototypes. And you can do this very, very easily, okay? All right, so let's calculate how much not prototyping ideas before you build them is actually costing you. Again, making some conservative assumptions, let's assume that you spend an extra month of developers' time because the solution that you build doesn't resonate with your customers as much as you had hoped. And as a result, you have to fix things and recode. And paying your developer $50 per hour, the total budget blow based on these conservative assumptions is $8,000 for each new feature. And depending on how close you are able to guess what solution will resonate with your users, the cost of recoding can be in the many thousands of dollars. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs who throw a lot of code away simply because they don't do this step. Okay, if you need to work on this step, type in 8K in the chat. Let your brain know that prototyping is something you need to pay attention to and possibly add into your process. Bjorn says 8K. Interesting. Only one person. Most of the time when I work with entrepreneurs, this is one of the things that people don't do. They just skip it, especially if you have technical people who say, this is a waste of time. Let me just jump into coding. Great. So don't forget opportunity cost. Absolutely. There is a ton of opportunity cost if you don't do a lot of these things that I'm suggesting because of the delays and miscommunications and project overruns and cost overruns, right? So you need to be able to do these things to save money. All right. So let me just take a quick note. Great. So I'll answer. So if you have questions, drop them into the Q&A portion, and then we'll answer them towards the end. Okay, let's keep moving. Here we go. Key number 2 is to plan, budget, and estimate effectively so there are no surprises. So this is steps 3 to 7 in the TechSpeak process. So once you've refined your idea and the solution, you're now ready to define, build, and deploy your solution. And instead of building your entire idea, you need to define a minimal viable version of the prototype that you created in step 2. By definition, an MVP is the smallest number of functionality that you can launch with that will still provide value to your customers. But simply reducing the number of features that you launch with from, let's say, 20 to 4 is not enough. Let me show you why. So have you guys ever wondered how the same project can be estimated to cost $10,000 and $100,000, and both estimates could be completely legitimate? Think about that. $10,000 and $100,000 for the same exact project. Well, that's because the details of what and how you build something matter a lot. Using the many development cost reducing strategies that I teach, one of my students was able to reduce the cost of her MVP from $50,000 to 15 and cut the development time from 4 months to 2 for a brand new product. Can you imagine what it would feel like to get the cost of your project reduced from $50,000 to 15? Wouldn't that be amazing? Type yes in the chat if that would be amazing, if you could cut the cost of your project to be significantly reduced, right? All of you should be saying yes. That's why we're here. Well, here's the problem. The problem is that most developers don't think like this. And agencies, if you're working with an agency, won't tell you this, because the more you build, the more they get paid. So it's really important for you to know these cost reducing strategies so you can work with them and push them to help you reduce the costs of your MVPs, and push back if they try to tell you it's not possible or this is the only way to do something. We need to build this something that scales to millions of users when you only have 100 or 1,000. It doesn't make sense. You need to strategically plan things and optimize over time. Your goal is to launch as quickly as possible and refine and iterate from there. And unfortunately, too many technical people fall into the trap of, we need to build this perfectly. I need to use this new shiny technology. But your job as the CEO is to implement a new way of thinking to make sure that they are not building more than you need to. And in order for this process to work, you must make their learn early, learn often, learn cheap mindset that we're talking about a part of your company culture, and hire everyone in your company who is willing to work in this way. Otherwise, unfortunately, it's not going to work. Okay, so this is something you need to be conscious about and constantly be thinking about. So let's calculate how much not planning properly and not hiring with the learn early, learn often, learn cheap cultural mindset is actually costing you. Making some conservative assumptions, let's assume that you spend an extra 3 months of developers' time because you've built too much functionality, and or that you have a 3-month delay as a result of a hire that doesn't fit into your company culture and is not working out as well as you had hoped, and paying your developer $50 per hour. The budget below, based on these conservative assumptions, is $24,000 to $48,000. But in addition to the monetary cost of delays, there are also opportunity costs as a result of being slower to market. A lot of you here who cannot get your teams to launch things on time and on budget, it's because you're not planning well. Steps 3 to 7 are so key to making sure that by the time you get to development, all of the details of what and how you're going to build something are set, so that there are no questions and no scope creep. Okay, so type 24 to 48K if you need to work on planning and hiring better, and set a company culture with this type of mindset. Commit to doing that right now, and something that you need to work on in the future. Type 24 to 48K if you need to work on this. Great, so we have Will and Christina and Lev and Marie committing to this with a big surprise face. Well, this is the unfortunate part, and I'm actually, that by the end, you'll see how atrocious these numbers are, right? And a lot of us are not paying attention to this. So my goal is to showcase this this part of the problem that a lot of people are not paying attention to. All right, so key number 3 is to use Agile project management to see the red flags earlier and to minimize the damage of mistakes. So this is step number 8 and 9 in the TechSpeak process. So this is where we're actually writing code. And there are 2 different project management processes that you can use, waterfall and Agile. I, of course, use Agile, and in a few minutes, you'll see why. First, let's analyze the waterfall project management, because that's what most people do, still, shockingly. But in a waterfall project management, you create your product specifications, you do the design, you write the code, you test, then you correct the bugs that you find, you test again, and then you deploy your code to the live environment where your potential customers can use and interact with it. So in a waterfall project management, you make a big plan up front, and then you execute in a linear fashion, hoping there won't be any changes in the plan, because once you agree on what's going to be built in your specifications, you can't actually change what you've agreed to build, even if your business requirements change. That's correct. So, and a typical project takes about, 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year to deploy. And if our goal is to launch things early and often, this process won't work for us. So we need a way to deploy code much more often than every 3 to 6 months. And we need to have a lot more flexibility to be able to adjust the product roadmap if the need arises. And that's exactly what Agile project management offers us. It requires us to break up code delivery timelines into shorter periods. Essentially, Agile consists of a lot of mini waterfalls, and each period between analyze and deploy is called a sprint. And it actually shouldn't be longer than 2 weeks. Agile project management allows us to break up large and unmanageable projects and split them into smaller, more manageable chunks that can be completed quickly, daily, weekly, or within 2 weeks maximum. And that's the magic of Agile project management. If you discover that something isn't working how it was intended to, then at least you caught it early and you can now make the necessary corrections. The mistake didn't cost you too much time or money, and you can get back on track fast. Coding can be expensive. Recoding is even more expensive. And similar to the waterfall methodology, the requirements of the sprint that is currently being executed can't be changed, but all other upcoming sprints can be shuffled around and new requirements can be added to any of the future sprints. And this works really, really well with the lean way of building products. Let's say you're talking to customers in your validation step, right? Which is step number 1. You're looking at what the market has to say in your customer validation step. You discover something that needs more priority and you need to shift your current roadmap. And with Agile, you have the flexibility to adjust that very, very quickly. And depending on how short your sprints are, right? So if you have 2-week sprints, you might have to wait 2 weeks. But if you have shorter sprints, you might actually not have to wait even 2 weeks. So the shorter the sprints, the better, okay? And what I've just shared with you are the principles behind Agile. From my experience as a fractional CTO, there are many, many people who are familiar with these principles and they claim to be practicing Agile project management, but who are woefully lacking in effective practices. And this is where I personally spend a lot of time when I go into startups and companies to help fix and optimize their Agile practices, to help their teams execute much more efficiently. I'll train their leaders, their project managers, their dev teams, UI, UX groups, QA, all of them join me to ensure that everyone is on the same page and is working with the same set of principles. They're learning a lot of stuff, unlearning a lot of stuff, with the goal to optimize their current process so that their team performs like a well-oiled machine. Remember in the beginning, I shared the hypothesis, test, learn, revise cycles that we're doing? By getting your team to execute really, really well and shortening your sprints, going from 2-week sprints to weekly sprints to daily sprints, or even multiple time a day deployments, that shortens your learning time and gives you a lot more data points to make better decisions on what to do with your next steps, which of course helps you refine and iterate a lot faster and more efficiently. So there's a company called Etsy. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. At 400 developers, they were making 250 deploys a day. 250 deploys a day. Imagine how finely tuned their process needed to be to do such frequent releases. But what they got as a company are 250 new data points every single day to make better decisions. Of course, they didn't get there overnight. And that's what I want you to aspire to, okay? Just remember, the faster you are launching, the faster you are learning, and the more you're not going in the wrong direction because you're constantly iterating, all right? All right, so let's calculate how much not using an efficient Agile framework and principles is costing you. Making some conservative assumptions, let's assume that you spend an extra 3 months of developers' time because you didn't catch the mistake early enough and you've built functionality incorrectly. And as a result, you have to find the mistake, then fix things, then recode and redo some of the work, okay? And paying your developer $50 per hour, the total budget blow based on these conservative assumptions is $24,000. But of course, in addition to the monetary cost of delays, there's also opportunity cost as a result of being slower to market. So type 24K if you need to revisit and optimize your Agile practices. And if you're not using Agile, you need to start right now. This is the first thing you need to do. All right, great. So we have people typing 24K, excellent. All right, let's go on to key number 4. Measure, analyze, and refine through rapid iterations. So this is step 10 in the TechSpeak process. So now that your MVP is launched and is in the hands of your customers, lots of people celebrate and they say, woohoo, we did it. We can't believe we'll launch something. But your work is actually far from over. And in my opinion, now is the time when the real work begins. So this is where you will implement all kinds of analytics and start to collect user behavior data that will help you learn how your users use your product, what features and functionalities they use the most, what delights them and what makes them frustrated, what brings them back to using your application over and over again, and why they might not be coming back as often as you like. All of these new data points will help you make decisions. Which one of your existing features need to be improved and how? What new features and functionalities would make the product stickier so more and more of your existing customers use your product on a regular basis and also recommend and refer new users to you? Data-driven decision-making to improving your product is absolutely transformational because instead of guessing what exact features to focus on to get more users to use your product, you will have data that will inform you on what next functionality that you should be testing and implementing, which prevents you from spending a lot of resources building the wrong things. So in step 1, which is validation, we're validating the idea's riskiest assumptions with a small set of our customers. Here in step 10, we're now scaling our learning with a big subset of our customers. And what we're going to do is get ideas on how to improve the retention of our product, right? So those ideas are going to be assumptions that we're making of how to improve the product. You take those assumptions, you take them back to validation, you create hypotheses around those assumptions, and you start to create features and functionalities that will improve the retention, and then you can measure them. So you go through all of these steps that we just went through, all of them, never skip them, in a circular fashion for every single one of your ideas and features and functionalities. And the smaller they are, the faster you're going to be able to go through the 10 steps. Okay, so that's the power of this process here. So let's actually calculate how much not using behavior analytics is costing you. The blown budget actually boils down to a formula, and the formula is the number of customers that you've lost times the cost of the user's lifetime value plus the marketing costs of getting the user to sign up to your application. And depending on how many users you lose as a result of not communicating the value of your product or feature quickly enough and not improving your product fast enough, the cost can be in the thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the variables in the formula. So let's plug in some conservative numbers here. Let's say you lost only 100 customers and your customer lifetime value is $150 and it cost you $50 to acquire these 100 customers. Then the total amount lost based on these conservative assumptions is $20,000. And that's assuming that you only lost 100 customers. This is how important this step is. And so many people, when they launch their products, they say, let's put on marketing dollars to get more users to come to our app. What you should be doing, right? And then what happens if we do that? Let's say you spend thousands of dollars getting people to your website to sign up. You convince them to sign up. And then your retention is very low. Your retention numbers are very low. So they check out your application and they don't use it. They don't realize the value of it. And so they abandon it. We call that the leaky bucket, where you put in spend a whole bunch of money on marketing and retention is very low. But if that's why the majority of your time in the early days should be spent on improving the retention and avoid this leaky bucket syndrome. Okay. So if LTV stands for lifetime value, users lifetime value. Great question. All right. So I think this session is being recorded. And if you don't have it, and I believe Sophie is going to be distributed, but if you don't reach out to me, I'll send you a recording as well. All right. So this is really, really important. If you need to work on this step, go ahead and type 20K into the chat to let your brain know this is something you need to work on. Almost all the startups I work with do not do this step at all, right? They don't understand how to do this. They don't know any of this stuff. And this is going to be a huge difference in how you improve your product, okay? All right, let's do a quick summary. Let's tally up our total minimum savings, right? So if you do all of these steps that we discussed today, you're going to save approximately at $121,000, right? But if you're not validating, if you're not prototyping, if you're not planning and hiring properly, not using an efficient agile framework, not using behavior analytics, then you're wasting $121,000 for each new product release. And this is only for one developer. How many projects do you know that only have one developer, right? Realistically, none. So what you need to be doing is realizing how much this is costing you, how much you can just, if you focus on your team and create efficiency and process and using some of these concepts, you can cut down a lot on your costs and not having to constantly fundraise. Okay, so the TechSpeak 10-step process will allow you to learn early, learn often, learn cheap, minimize mistakes, minimize miscommunications, minimize missed deadlines, and minimize waste, and of course, save you time and money. And by learning early and often, you will increase your chances of hitting success. Again, all of these steps are a part of the process, so make sure that you don't skip any of them. It is the combination of these steps that creates the efficiency and the transparency that you should be looking for. So this is the question I want you to ponder. Startups generally don't get a lot of extra cash laying around. Why are we not focusing on optimizing the product development process? Because having an optimized process is clearly a huge way to save yourself from wasting precious cash on something that can easily be avoided. And of course, extend your startup's runway. So learn this process to get your time and money back and ensure that you don't waste a bunch of money doing a bunch of things that aren't important or doing things incorrectly without an inefficient process. Very quickly, let's do a recap of everything that we learned so far, and then I'm going to take questions. So the first thing we learned is that there is a difference between releasing code and releasing code effectively and efficiently, to use the lean way of building products to learn faster and iterate to success, to use validation and prototyping to test and refine ideas, to use development cost reducing strategies when defining your MVPs to reduce the cost and time of development, implement an efficient agile framework so you can see the red flags sooner and minimize mistakes, and use data-driven decision-making to improve your products. Okay? If you want to share what has been the most valuable for you so far, let me know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all or what combination of it. And then I am going to take some questions. So type in your questions into the Q&A session. Very quickly, for any of you who are interested, I have TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs Academy. It's a 10-step process based on 10 modules. If you're interested in checking it out, go to techspeak.co. And I wanted to offer a 15% discount code to the FoundED community. The discount code is FoundED, ED, right? So check that out. And one other thing I wanted to offer the community is a 15-minute consultation. If you wanted to book that, feel free to do that. Again, there's no strings attached. You don't have to take the training. I'm happy to provide whatever help I can as a fractional CTO, and feel free to book a session if you are interested. All right, so let's get to some questions here. We have from an anonymous attendee, who do you recommend to be a part of the customer validation work? Developers too? I recommend the entire team does the customer validation process, simply because everybody's going to do it slightly differently. Everybody is going to resonate, right? Like your customers will resonate so much different with different types of people. And what helps is the different perspectives, right? And so even, so what I recommend, if possible, is all of your teams or you individually do customer validation separately, and then you look at the results and evaluate the results together. Okay, so I absolutely recommend that you do that. Feel free to ask a follow-up question on that as well. So how much, Kat is asking, how much prototype validation is enough in terms of potential users? So anytime you're doing any kind of validation, this is the number one question that I always get, is like, how much should you validate? You don't want to spend too much time doing something, right? You want to validate your riskiest assumptions so that you are removing as much guesswork as possible in the beginning of the process. So you're not like building a lot of unnecessary things and then recoding. As we saw how once you get into the coding, recoding is the most expensive part of your journey there, right? So we want to be able to invalidate and prototype, basically remove as much guesswork as possible. And the way you do that is you need to start to see patterns. You do it until you see enough patterns that you get conviction that, you know what, I'm headed in the right direction. Hopefully that answers your question, Kat. If there are any other questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A section. Let's see, thank you, Nelly, for a great presentation. You're welcome. I love the part about validation and prototyping tools. Yes, again, feel free to reach out to me. Oh, there's another question from Will. How do you figure out a customer's price tolerance for a solution early on? Should that be part of the experiment? Absolutely, Will. That's such a great question. Everything you have in your startup, every idea is a hypothesis, right? And everything needs to be tested. Your pricing, your features and functionalities, how you even your marketing material, right? You want to be able to A/B test a lot of these different things. And again, those are all hunches. You can, if you're an expert and you really understand your customer, you can guess closer to what the customer would actually need, but it's a refinement. And by the way, just because you've validated something right now, it doesn't mean it's going to be true forever. That's why we're constantly testing things. Your startup is a big, giant experiment that you're constantly running, and it's a never-ending process, because as soon as you stop testing, as soon as you assume that you know everything about your customer, that's the day that you start to, as in my opinion, as a startup, will start to fall short. Because you're not going to be able to evolve fast with the competition and also with the market itself, right? The market demands are very different, and you need to be ready for absolutely everything. Think of the pandemic like the biggest experiment, and the best example that I can share with you is the pandemic. Like everything you knew prior to the pandemic has changed, right? You could have had validated all of your ideas, but the market has changed drastically as a result of this one event, and you now need to be able to question all of your assumptions. Are any of the things that you've been doing in the past still relevant? The customer has changed drastically as a result of the same exact event. So that's why we're constantly, this is an experiment that's ongoing. And just because something has proven to be true in the past, it doesn't mean that it's going to remain true for the rest of the duration of your startup. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. It looks like there are no other questions. If there is, feel free to type in. We still have a few minutes left in our time together.
And if folks have questions coming up, feel free to email, reach out to Nelly directly. I will be sending everyone a recording once we've processed it. We'll also be sending information about the discount code and the consultation that Nelly is offering. And there you got her email. I'll throw this in for everyone who's still on the call. Nelly, thank you so much. This was such an interactive and valuable session, and to get it from another founder with experience in the field is fantastic. I know that everyone took away so much, and thank you to everyone who attended. I dropped it in the chat, but in January, we're going to do a series on EdTech sales. We hope to see you there. And of course, join our community. Nelly is in it. You'll see her on Slack. And we'll see you in the future for other events. Thank you again, Nelly.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure. Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Good, Sandra.